Well, another Cellar, number 202. Welcome. Won't be doing one next week because that falls on Christmas Eve. I will, however, be doing a live cast at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. Let's see, is that when I'm doing it? 11:30? Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing it at 11. But there's going to be a break at 10 minutes till midnight. And then there'll be a 20-minute break. Go out and shoot off firecrackers or whatever. I'm going out and shoot off a big block of fireworks in the middle of the street. And then I'll rejoin you at 10 past. And yeah, that's what we'll do. Let's see. I'm making this on Friday. Saturday, tomorrow, I have a Zoom call at 11:30 p.m. to New Zealand, where it'll be 5:30 in the afternoon tomorrow for him. And then the next morning at 9 a.m., I'm running at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm running a Wheel of Blame for 6 guys in Okinawa at whatever the heck time it is there. So that's going to be a weird weekend. So let's jump in, shall we? I'm pretty sure dwarves learning to fight had something to do with dwarves women having beards and elves teasing those dwarven women about their beards. That's certainly one plausible explanation. The whole thing about dwarven women having beards is just hilarious to me. As far as I know, it's completely made up. It was Gary's whim. And so, yes, they have beards. And there have been, there have been other. I seem to recall reading a story or two where they had long silky beards. But to be honest, that might be post Gary's doing all this, because I have been reading a number of real contemporary fantasy writers. Oh, by the way, speaking of fantasy, if you know of the Temeraire series about dragons during the age of Napoleon, I really, really enjoyed it. It's one of those crazy things. And that author now, Naomi Novik, Novik, has a new, there's at least 2 books. Look up her name and Scholomance, Scholomance. Really, I raced through the first book and I dove into the second already. Really interesting stuff. Well, I got completely off track there. No, I didn't. I was talking about fiction. Okay, next one. Thanks for the Duck Quest recommendation. Bought a copy. It's quite quack beautiful. The puns are fun as puns can be. Okay, I'll grant you that. And that's how can I look at them. I love Starhat's webpage, and the minis are impressive. Yes. And a box of them came in today at Jim's, but not his, and not the ones I was waiting for, just the ones he threw in to give us. So I can't wait to see what came. Darcy is a nice person. Enjoyed interacting with him. Yeah, he's the 11:30 Zoom call I'm making tomorrow night. He seems to be a pretty interesting fellow. I agree. I'm looking forward to the call. Let's see, go on. I mentioned your reco. I'm guessing that means recommendation. He was pleased. Yeah, and he sent me a thank you. Keep up the good recommendations. We need a map of the hobby. Well, I'd love to. But before anybody starts sending me stuff, don't. I don't even buy games anymore. I got nowhere to put them. No time to play them all. I did this as a favor and did a read through and going to consult with him on the game tomorrow night. Well, Saturday night, whenever you watch this. It's actually Saturday night. I have done. Well, I wrote a series of columns for Gygax magazine, not all of which got printed. I called it the bottom of the pile. Those good games that get overlooked or get played once or twice, and then some new thing comes in and they end up down on the bottom of the pile, but they're really, really worth looking at again. Maybe someday I'll put that online. All right, here we go. This is interesting. Let's go killing at the zoo. Yeah, I'd love to write those lyrics. I've written those lyrics many times in my head. In Carbondale, how long did you and your players maintain the zoo kill style of gameplay? What was the catalyst for change? What did your gameplay change to? Okay. Interesting question, and I'm glad to answer it because I'm completely at ease admitting that as I only had the 3 books, we played the D6, everything was a D6, etc., the very base rules for, I went in August, and we started playing late September, early October, and then we played up until winter break because we were on quarters. So that would have been up into about mid-December. And we were playing once a week, 5-6 hours at a time under the old system. And that's what I was doing. I was just going through the book. That's what I had done, is gone through the book. And Gary pointed out to me that, well, those were kind of those were suggestions and handy things to have, but really I ought to think it out myself. And so I told the guys at the last session before the break that when we came back, the word wasn't popular then, but we were going to restart the campaign. And that, no, we wouldn't do everybody at level 1, but we're going to take a few steps back and play it differently and play it better is what I promised them, because I'd gotten a copy of Greyhawk. So while they were all on break, I lived down in Carbondale because as most of anybody I was married and had a daughter. And so we weren't just playing on Saturdays, but there was a select group that came out and played at my house once a week. My wife worked second shift, so it worked out really well. And Mandy was a very outgoing child, and it was all sweet. So we played probably, I want to say 8 or 9 sessions, 45 plus hours of the killing at the zoo, figuring out what was going on. Remember, we're restarting characters because people are dying, and we're having a ball, but I knew in my heart that it just wasn't organized right, and I'm having these conversations every few weeks with Gary, who's steering me to do my own thing and use these charts to help me do it. So, thanks to my sponsor, the Independent Publishers Union, while they were going home for the holidays, I created the beginning of the Qualishar campaign. And that's what we played until I left. And in it, there was the crumb for the campaign hook was in the first small adventure that I ran for them when they came back. And I believe everybody started, I believe we used an average die. And because playing the other way with, strict those rules and the enormous amounts of treasure and stuff we were finding, everybody was, up around 5th level, 6th level in 45 hours of intense, ridiculous looting. And so I believe we used an average die. So nobody was a 1 and nobody was a 6. And the rest was the curve that the average die gives. And I think we had the player that should have gotten the best result in the rebate got it, and that was the guy that we called Hobbit. And so from that point on, there was a purpose. I had encounter areas drawn out. I had monsters waiting. I had the subcast in the wings waiting. And as those first few adventures unfolded, I kept dropping or they kept discovering. And so the campaign developed sort of organically, in that they had a lot of input in whether they went and what they did. And anyway, that's the catalyst was it just didn't feel right. Plus the fact that Gary was telling me that I could do it better. He was not one to tell you you're doing something wrong. So it became a campaign, and there was an ultimate guy they knew about named Qualish, and they had found this jade cube with mystic engravings on it, and they knew that Kelnor, his chief flunky, who was like a 12th or 14th level wizard, had a laboratory, so they were looking for the laboratory and finding clues, and it had a purpose to it. They wanted to find the laboratory, and when we got down to that last adventure, everybody was just kind of like, oh, the heck with it, and they were, doing great feats of daring do, and everything was going pretty good for most of the party, and then all of a sudden, the guy we called Weirbear, he was a big burly fighter that had mastered lycanthropy, so that he didn't change unless he wanted to, and he could change at will sometimes. Anyway, he went and pulled a lever that everybody knew they weren't supposed to pull, and a 10-ton granite block dropped out of the ceiling and turned him into Weirbear butter. Great on toast, I hear. And that was kind of how it all ended up. And then, of course, within a few months, a couple of the guys had submitted what were then NPCs that later became characters, so character classes. So that's how it worked. That's what it changed to. We were very inventive. I had magic users that were spending great amounts of time and money researching new spells, purpose-built spells, if you will. And some of it was quite ingenious. And no, I don't remember, because there's a good chance that some of them got added in at a later date in one of the books that I edited. It's very possible. I don't know. That was so many years ago. But we were very wow. Let's let our imaginations run wild, and it was up to me to Well, I know this sounds weird, but in a game sense, keep it real. And again, remember, we were playtesting. Well, I was running a playtest group for Gary. They didn't know they were playtesting, but they did know that I was talking to him. And I would always, after a call, the next game session, yeah, I talked to Gary, and we discussed what I talked about sometimes if it pertained to what we were doing. Okay, a question for you. A popular board game channel on YouTube asked a bunch of board game designers and people in the industry, why is gaming good? Given your long history with games, I wonder if you wouldn't mind answering that question in your next video. Kind of wish they had asked you. And then a very nice compliment. Okay, why is it good? Well, first off, I guess we have to define where it came from and why where it came from was good. And it originally came from Kriegspiel, war games practiced by generals and what have you. And that was probably good because by practicing with lead flats, they probably didn't kill as many of their troops as they might have. I'm guessing on balance, it was probably better than worse. So that was good. Now, it became a diversion, a hobby, whatever. All right, what does gaming provide? And what got me into the 6th grade into D-Day was problem solving. I really value a game that gives me lots of things to do. That's why Tactics 2 is a very abstract game in that they don't name the armor units or anything, but it's problem solving. Much more than that is a game, if you can find it, called Field Marshal. It was originally by an Australian company called Jedco. And when TSR was dancing around with Jedco, thinking about publishing a couple of their games in the United States, this was one of the ones that was under consideration. Unfortunately, some fool decided that let's compete with Africa Corps. Right, let's go compete with one of the... If there were 4 pillars supporting wargaming, Africa Corps was one of them. When I kept saying, Field Marshal, Field Marshal. The thing about Field Marshal is that it's variable. You start with a battle array, a lineup, forces. But as the game goes on, it was one of the first games I saw that had cards that were affecting the play of the game. You drew a card every turn. Oh wow! You got an extra battalion of whatever. It's armor, infantry, paratroops. It's very abstract. It's how to use combined arms. Artillery, I think, might be the other one. And the next card might go, oh, it's going bad on the home front. Send back a division. Oh shit! Now I got to do my job with a big chunk of my forces missing for don't know how long. That kind of problem solving I love, and that's what drew me to gaming. D-Day didn't have nearly that much, but that's what drew me. That's why I think that's good. I think it's great mental exercise. Now, beyond the individual good, let's look at the communal good. You got to have a player to play against. Ooh, communication, camaraderie, a friendship perhaps, a friendly rivalry. Those are all good social pluses. Multiplayer games, same thing. Why are family games still popular? They come and they go, but they're still around. the society, the company, the Gemütlichkeit, that feeling of doing this all together, having fun, competing together, laughing at, competing against. It's all great. Miniatures. If you get into miniatures, historical miniatures particularly, it really, really compels you to study and do research so that you can paint them right and play them right. Or at least know good rules from bad. Now, minis have tended to attract some of the more extreme gamers. We call them bolt counters. If they're in modern stuff, oh, there's not enough bolts on the front of that pre-war Sherman tank. That prototype, they should have had 2 more bolts on each side of the glasses. Or, these chariots ought to go faster than most chariots because the Seleucids had a novel suspension system. Now, as far as I know, Seleucids never used chariots, but I was desperate to pull a name out of the sky. And when you got a house overhead, that's hard. That's good. It can kindle an interest. I was already into. I was avidly devouring military history and that type of nonfiction, and the two fed each other. That's good. Now, the bad can be when you go too far down that rabbit hole, become antisocial, or spend all your time painting and no longer have a social life. There are, but then that personality would find something to do to the extreme. It's not like gaming's going to make you crazy. And then we get into role-playing. What's good about role-playing? Oh my God. I could make a whole evening of what's good about role-playing, but this was a board gaming website and a board gaming question. Going back to touch on the social, if it's a very popular game, then there'll probably be tournaments or things like that, and there's a chance to make more friends, meet more people. I'll give you an example in another type of game, and I'll use Mahjong. Now, for those of you who don't understand or know Mahjong, it's kind of like rummy. Mostly like rummy. There's 3 suits. There's tiles from 1 to 9, 4 of each number, and then there's some funny tiles. My wife I play it. My wife and I learned from the wife of somebody when we were at TSR, and we've played it ever since, and we've taught people whenever we could. And she plays it quite actively under league rules, which are different than the Oriental rules, the Asian rules that I learned to play under, that I prefer to play in. And there's a game that's made her tons of friends over the years. And we've cemented friendships with couples over the years by teaching them to play, and now we have something that's more interesting than cards. Though God knows I love playing cards, don't get me wrong. But you don't need your hands, so you can eat and gesticulate and drink and, whatever. What's good about gaming is, and again, we'll just go back to the board games You meet other people. You may develop an interest that'll cause you to delve into that area. And the acquisition of knowledge is never a bad thing unless it's, how to make bombs. But pardon me. The problem solving and the chance to socialize and make more friends. So the what's good about RPGs is another night. I want to go to bed sometime. What advice would you give to us that draw their own dungeon maps? What I mean is, what are some of your personal tricks or tips? Do you use hex paper, graph, line, notebook, or blank? Can you show us an example map? No, I can't do that. I haven't drawn any for so long, not since I wrote whatever one was the last of my things for Eldritch that never got published. First off, don't be afraid to deviate from the 4 to the inch. Now, from doing detailed portions or wings or additions to a large complex or whatever, 4 to the inch is great. But if you're trying to draw a whole temple complex, things I've done in the past, which are usually far more underground than above, don't hesitate to jump to 5 or 6 to the inch. 6 is actually easier because of the math. But don't hesitate to do that. Don't ink them in. Don't know what's going to happen. Pencil them in. Ink them after they've gone down and nothing has happened. Don't ink them in. Who knows? I don't know. Who knows? Stuff happens in the dungeon. What happens in the dungeon stays in the dungeon, unless it's an epic tale, and then it gets spread all over. But another good reason not to ink them in is you might screw up and have them tell them to turn left, and they go left, and oops, you meant right. Well, that's okay. Just there's a lot of good reasons, but no need to do that. But again, don't hesitate. Now, I've got a pad around here somewhere of graph paper that is ridiculously huge. I mean, it's like this wide, and you gotta get up where the camera can see me, this tall. It's enormous. And it's getting yellow with age now. I have no idea where I acquired it, but you should look for it. Go online for oversized graph paper. That thing you can draw an enormous portion of a campaign on. Small. So don't be afraid to redraw, just rough draw. This is the temple complex, this is where they garb, this is where, on your big map, and then you can redraw more of a detail. As a DM, an active DM, don't be afraid to draw complex, windy, whatever. Or don't be afraid to draw natural formations of, when trying to describe that to the players. When I used to do before I started doing the wheel, when I used to do regular adventures, I carried a whiteboard about this big, and I would just rough sketch. Kind of like this. Okay? And off we'd go. That will help you in your descriptive, trying to, get the hint of, 5 feet southwest, and trying to contour a natural cavern. It's crazy. But you can help them with a whiteboard. The only other thing is, don't forget what you put where. I know it sounds a little weird, but when you're deviously drawn along and, this is a secret door, a secret passage to, and it's to, number 7, whatever the hell that is. Well, remember that when you're through in number 7. Where'd it come in? How'd they get there? You can't have them follow that secret passage, wending their way through the lower levels and come up on a blank stone wall. Well, I mean, you could, but that would suck, and it wouldn't serve any purpose. Let's see, what else? Whiteout is still your friend. Because, hey, you might just get a whim that down some long passageway, now there's a hidden door that leads off to this other neat thing you thought of. And here's a good little side adventure, okay? So, even if you did ank it in, consider this. Pardon me. Gary drew out a lot of levels, 6, 7, 8, and never drew another one. Because, and I wasn't involved in these games, I've only got the testimony of those who were. One whole portion of Greyhawk was the orc level. For a long time, and they finally cleared out the orcs. Well, I'll be damned, those damn hobgoblins. Now it's the hobgoblin level. And of course, hobgoblins being hobgoblins, they've changed a few things here and there, not a lot. But think about the reusability factor of your maps. How somebody else taking them over might do that. And now you've already got the map. They've got a rough map of it. Now you can just collapse a few tunnels, dig a couple of more, erase a few secret doors, put in a couple others, take out all the traps, or not. That's the best advice I got. Use a good pencil and have a great eraser. After all, you're not writing in stone. Okay. All right. This one's okay. I had to chop chunks out of this. Along the discussion of the archetype, what elves are and why they're chaotic, aligned by chaotic, I mean the 9 alignment system. Well, I'm not trying to tell you that I was inside Gary's head. But when he explained it all to me, it made a lot of sense. Elves are capricious. They generally do good. But look at that elf leader in the Battle of the 5 Armies that rode the big stag with the enormous horns. He was still pissed off that they'd stolen a stone 7 generations before, and was just going to sit there and watch, it all get slaughtered till somebody preyed on his conscience or whatever. And chaotic. See, the problem with elves as they were originally conceived, the damn Tolkien movies had not been out to make elves what people started playing them as. They might be tall as humans, 6 foot, 6'2", but skinny and thin as a rail. Certainly not the Legolas dude. They were part of the Fae, and the Fae were capricious and chaotic, mischievous, liked to play tricks. Some of them were evil, stole babies, changelings, those type of things. So the elves, up to the point of 1974, 73, when they were developing this game, what you read from Tolkien and read from some of the other books of Appendix N was not what Peter Jackson ended up putting on the screen. However, as more people read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, that image took place. And so, really, Peter Jackson just hired a guy that kind of personified what people had become to think of by then. But when preconception, Tolkien's image of elves had no play on the sources that they used and determined chaotic. Chaotic simply meant not to be predicted, not to be taken for granted. How will let's look at some of the other chaotics, if elves are such a problem. Sprites, pixies, brownies, whatever. Folklore and myth had it that you weren't, if you did the right things, laid out the bowl of milk and this and that, then they wouldn't harm you. Getting them to do something good for you was a whole different ballgame. That's where it came from. They're not neutral in that it's never always just for themselves, but that plays a lot of it, and why sometimes you'd think they'd react one way, self-interest reacts a different way, and so therefore, well, you had that prediction wrong. Okay, then the comment on the hat, not this one. By the way, this is not Confederate. It is blue. It is probably 25 years old, but it is blue. I wouldn't wear a Confederate hat. Confederates were traitors. And this person takes issue with a knit cap being called a bean or a beanie. Well, hats or whatever you want to call them. And I'm sure the cultures have different things. When I was in college, that flat newsboy type was called a skimmer. Even though, there was once a straw hat called a skimmer. It was a skimmer because you could literally take it off and skim it like a Frisbee. Just what you call it. All right. Now, what do you call it? I discovered the name Myrmidon for the 6th level limit cap of Dwarf Fighter in the original obsolete, he calls it, D&D, was, and the Webster's Merriam only... the dictionary says a member of a legendary Thessalian people who accompanied the king Achilles in the Trojan War. Right. I'm not finding anything about the etymology of the word and the name for another Greek-looking word is published in a Dragon article, plethora of paladins. Well, I have no idea what that was. It's a funny name for a type of knight crusader society that's like a paladin but is neutral good aligned. So there's some historical mythology beyond the D&D authors making it up. Well, Gary and I had a couple of interesting conversations along this very line. And I'm going to have to put my glasses on because I asked him, I said, what's with all the names of each level? And he said, thank God for thesauri. Because, okay, if you look at what the fighter is really called, he's called a fighting man. That's what the original nomenclature was, fighting man. So, how many synonyms for fighting man can you find? All right. You started out as a veteran with no points. All right. Here's that step above the crowd that I've spoken about before, which makes you special enough to be an adventurer. Then there's warrior. Then you're a swordsman. Then you became a hero. Now you're a swashbuckler. Myrmidon, a legendary fighter. And after that, champion, superhero, lord. They're kind of ranked, but let's face it, Myrmidon, swashbuckler, swordsman, warrior, veteran, they could have all been in any one of those orders. Okay? Magic user, how many different synonyms can you find for spellcaster? Seer, conjurer, theurgist, thaumaturgist, magician, enchanter, warlock, sorcerer, necromancer, or necromancer, depending on how you like to pronounce it, or a wizard. Now, these are all out of the first edition, or actually the old D&D. Clerics was another problem. How many names for a priest can you have? An adept, a village priest, a vicar, a curate, a bishop, a lama, or a patriarch. Again, synonyms for somebody who speaks to God, ranked in an order that sounds hierarchical. Now, what was really funny, I got this other one marked here, was having to come up with names for the thief class, now known as the rogue. So, how many names can he have? Now remember, the thief was not a bad guy. So, perp, felon, those are all out. So, there's an apprentice thief, a footpad. Okay? And oddly enough, there's a lot of literature that ranks bad guys as to their skill level. Robber, burglar, cut purse, sharper, pilferer, master pilferer. And only then did you become a thief at level 9. A full-fledged thief. A master thief. And then higher levels. So what was the plan there? The plan was synonyms. Paladins, I suggest that you go look them up again. Try small p paladin. Paladins can refer to the paladins of Charlemagne, which I know is a big influence on Gary and Dave. So I suggest you go look at his paladins, who are charged to go forth and do right and smite evil. Now, this probably, I don't know that this is historical so much as it is lore, but that's it. All right. The next is a comment not made by me, but I agree. TSR 3, I guess that's what we're calling the newest mess. lost the last sliver of my goodwill on this one. I'm sure that's in response to them starting a lawsuit, then canceling a lawsuit, but not canceling the Indiegogo. I got another longer comment on that. The next comment was, the beard is epic. No, the beard is a pain in the ass, let me tell you. The only reason I did that this year, because of my great-grandbabies. It works. I'm going to have fun with my great-grandkids. Also, I have been known to drive down busy streets and on the 2 or 3 days before Christmas and freak little kids out. Suddenly they behave. Imagine that. Oh boy, I can't. The overhead lights. That's why I have to have the bill. Anyway, that's why I do the beard. The beard's coming off. Probably New Year's. I just did it for fun. Back when I was much rounder, I would let my beard. I'd start growing my beard in October, and I'd do Santa gigs. I did Santa for a couple of office parties, and yeah. All right, now I'm going to read this. I know the person who wrote this, very intelligent person, and he says what I feel probably better than I could say. The lawsuit against Wizards of the Coast by TSR, which has been removed, albeit likely temporarily, is strictly to enforce their trademarks, which you're required to do to maintain a trademark, otherwise you can lose it. However, the fundraiser is deceptively claiming that they're going to sue WotC and force him to remove the disclaimer. It's a bait and switch. Justin, the CEO of the new TSR, sets the bait as giving a false hope that he has a case to remove the disclaimer, but reveals at the end that initially the money will be used to support his trademark case, which I predict will be refiled. See the words right from his mouth, and he gives a website here, YouTube, anyway. Problem is, the disclaimer, as stupid as it is, does not defame TSR or any individual gamer, but only really attacks their own product. It's a good point. I didn't get named in there for creating some of that stuff that's now just deigned to be, naughty, or nasty, or racist, or whatever. So, no. So TSR has no case and could even be sanctioned for filing such a specious claim. Quite unfortunate, because I actually like the idea of the new TSR and support Ernie. The people who will be damaged are those giving TSR money in hopes of having the disclaimer removed. TSR has no ability or intent to do so. That smells like fraud to me. All this does is give ammunition to TSR's detractors and hurts the hobby as a whole. Time for the new TSR to act more responsibly. And in response to that, thanks for the roundup, very comprehensive. I feel there are some chaotic personalities at work in new TSR, not usually a recipe for success. Not ever a recipe in my experience. They have assiduously courted me off and on for several months. I don't want anything to do with it. I was doing a live stream with their PR guy, and when he made the claim that they are TSR, I absolutely disputed that fact right then. I don't have a clue as to what the hell they're doing. I am sorry to see a family that I have known since 1974 fractured the way the Gygax family has fractured. We'll let it go at that. Pardon me. That's all we have here. Like I said, save your questions for the live stream if you're going to be here. It's my understanding that the live stream will be recorded, so it will be available if you can't be here. And I know what kind of an idiot does a New Year's Eve live stream. Me and Jim. We're the idiots. So save your questions for then. I won't be doing one in a week from now because that'll be Christmas Eve. I'll see you on New Year's Eve live from the cellar. Dodata Gobi.
Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, a curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's a curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, a curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory, tight with tramp under a tree,
High as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.